Chapter 23. Fishing. Ibarra and Maria Clara, together with their friends, go fishing at the lake. To entertain them, Andeng plays the harp, while Maria Clara sings a sad love song. In one of the fish cages, the men discovered that the fishing nets have entangled a crocodile. Elias, followed by Ibarra, jumps into the lake, successfully killing the crocodile. Chapter 24. In the Woods. Padre Salve passes near a stream while going to the picnic organized by Ibarra. He hears some voices, hides behind a tree, and spies on Maria Clara and her friends while they bathe. After the alferez leaves the picnic, the Guardia Civil arrives at the picnic, looking for Elias, the boatman who had thrown the alferez into the mud hole and who was assaulted by Padre Damaso. Chapter 25. In the House of the Sage. Ibarra consults Tasio the sage about the school building that he plans to build. The sage advises Ibarra not to pursue his project, else he incur the ire of the friars and other government officials, who would do everything in their power to ruin him. Chapter 26. The Eve of the Fiesta. It is the eve of the fiesta and the people are busy preparing food, while Ñor Juan supervises the workmen laying the cornerstone and building the foundation of the proposed school building. Some individuals volunteer to contribute towards the construction of the school. Some promise to pay the teacher, while others offer their services for free. Ibarra remains optimistic that his endeavor will succeed, while Tasio advises him to be cautious. Chapter 27. In the Twilight. Maria Clara and Ibarra, together with their friends, go for a walk. They meet a leper. In the act of compassion, Maria Clara gives her locket to the sick man. Chapter 28. Correspondence. This chapter features the three letters between a correspondent and his friend, between Capitan Martin and Luis Chiquito, and between Ibarra and Maria Clara. The correspondent vividly describes to his friend the fiesta and the many events that have taken place in San Diego. Capitan Martin narrates to Luis Chiquito the good fortune of Capitan Tiago in winning a game of cards. Maria Clara reveals that she is worried that Ibarra is sick and sends Andeng to make some tea for her sweetheart. Chapter 28. The Morning. A procession is held during the last day of the fiesta, where the people parade the images of San Diego de Alcala, Saint Francis, and the Virgin. The people in the procession are greeted by the sound of firecrackers, song, and religious prayers. Chapter 30. In the Church. The noise is disorderly. Parishioners try to push one another while dipping their hands on the holy water. The people are waiting for the sermon of Padre Damaso, when they noticed that the alcalde's uniform looked similar to the costume worn by one of the actors in the play. Chapter 31. The Sermon. In his sermon, Padre Damaso reprimands some natives who, after receiving education in Manila and in Europe, are now contented in not kissing the hands of a friar and not offering him the honor due his rank. Padre Damaso declares that these individuals would get what they deserved and that God would punish them for their wicked acts. And in the end of the sermon, Elias approaches Ibarra and warns him that his life is in danger. Chapter 32. The Derrick. Ibarra, the alcalde, and other individuals go to the site of the proposed school to lay the cornerstone of the building. The alcalde throws some mortar on the stone, followed by the curate and the alferez. When it's Ibarra's turn, the derrick suddenly falls apart, dropping the heavy block of stone. Fortunately, Ibarra isn't hurt, the only casualty being the yellowish man who operates the machine. Chapter 33. Free Thought. Elias visits Ibarra at his house and informs him that many enemies are out to ruin him, as confirmed by the incident with the derrick. Because of Ibarra's education and beliefs, Elias says that many people would want him dead. Elias affirms that he is only paying his debt, since Ibarra saved him from being killed by the crocodile. Chapter 34. The Dinner. At dinner, Padre Damaso belittles Ibarra for building a school. Ibarra remains silent, but when Padre Damaso insults his father's honor, Ibarra lunges at the curate with a knife in hand, threatening to kill him. Fortunately, Maria Clara intervenes. Chapter 35. Comments. The town discusses the incident between Padre Damaso and Ibarra. The town captain criticized Ibarra for his lack of self-control, while others opine that Ibarra would be branded as a filibuster and will be excommunicated by the church. Don Filipo and Capitana Maria, however, both agreed that Ibarra did the right thing in protecting his father's honor and memory. Chapter 36. The First Cloud. Arriving from the convent, Capitan Tiago tells Maria Clara and Tia Isabel that he has agreed to break his daughter's wedding engagement to Ibarra. Capitan Tiago adds that Maria Clara must forget Ibarra, since she would now marry a relative of Padre Damaso. Chapter 37. His Excellency. The Governor-General converses with Ibarra about the dinner incident. He assures Ibarra that he will be protected by the government from the evil intentions of the friars and religious corporations. The Governor-General promises that he would talk to the Archbishop regarding Ibarra's excommunication, while advising Capitan Tiago not to break his daughter's engagement to Ibarra. The Procession. Another procession is held, where the town displays the image of Saint Joseph, Saint Francis, San Diego, and the Virgin. Tasha sees the ragged and poor clothing of the saints and sarcastically remarks that the saints would be ashamed if they would see the lifestyle of their fellow servants of God. Chapter 39. Doña Consolacion. Doña Consolacion, the alferez's wife, calls Sisa to sing, but proceeds to maltreat her by whipping her when she refuses to dance. The alferez arrives, stops the whipping, and calls his servant to feed and clothe the insane woman, who is to be treated by a doctor hired by Ibarra. Chapter 40. Right and Might. Maria Clara, her friends Don Filipo, and Padre Salve are watching a play when Ibarra arrives to join them. Padre Salve orders Don Filipo to prohibit Ibarra from watching the play, since he has been excommunicated and his presence would corrupt the people. Padre Salve walks out when Don Filipo refuses to prevent Ibarra from watching the play. Chapter 41. Two Visits. Elias informs him that Maria Clara is sick with a fever. A man named Lucas then arrives, asking for money for his brother who was killed in the dark. Ibarra tells him to come back that afternoon since he is meeting with a sick person. Chapter 42. The Espadañas. Don Tiburcio de Espadañas and his wife Victorina, together with Linares, a distant relative of Padre Damaso, arrives at the house of Capitan Tiago to treat Maria Clara. Doña Victorina speaks highly of Linares, telling Capitan Tiago that he has come to the Philippines to seek work and to find a wife. The fake Dr. Españada prescribes some medicine for Maria Clara as they wait for Padre Damaso to arrive. Chapter 34. Plans. Linares introduces himself to Padre Damaso as the godson of his brother-in-law. Linares says that he graduated with a law degree from a university and that he has come to the Philippines to find work and to look for a wife. Upon hearing this, Padre Damaso calls Captain Tiago. Lucas, meanwhile, approaches Padre Salve to ask for help, being the brother of the yellowish man killed when the derrick collapsed. Chapter 44. An examination of conscience. Padre Salve mentions that Padre Damaso will be transferred to a town in Tayabas. Since Maria Clara is still sick, the curate suggests that Maria Clara makes her confession. Tia Isabel agrees with the curate and prepares Maria Clara for her confession. After hearing Maria Clara's confession, Padre Salve exits the room looking gloomy, with his forehead covered with perspiration. Chapter 45. The Hunted. Elias goes to Tanawan, Batangas to converse with Capitan Pablo, the leader of some bandits. Elias asks Capitan Pablo to stop committing violent acts against the government, since they can get the help of Ibarra in obtaining justice and implementing some reforms for the country. Chapter 46. The Cockpit. At the cockpit arena, Lucas approaches Bruno and Tarsilo, recruiting them to attack the town barracks. Lucas declares that aside from joining the attack organized by Ibarra against the barracks, they can exact their revenge on the members of the Guardia Civil who killed their fathers. Chapter 47. The Two Señoras. Doña Victorina and Don Tiburcio pass by the house of the Alferez. As Doña Consolacion mocks and ridicules Doña Espadaña and her crippled husband, the two women start exchanging insults and almost get into a fight that is averted by the arrival of the Alferez and Padre Salve. To defend her honor, Doña Victorina asks Linares to challenge the Alferez to a duel. Chapter 48. The Enigma. Ibarra wishes to inform Maria Clara that his excommunication is lifted, but upon arriving at her house, he sees Maria Clara with Linares. He is invited to come into the house, but he visits instead the site of the school building, asking the supervisor Ñor Juan about its progress. Chapter 49. The Voice of the Hunted. Elias meets Ibarra at the lakeside. He narrates the conversation he has with Capitan Pablo. Elias says that Ibarra, because of his education and position in society, can ask the Spanish government to implement radical reforms such as fewer privileges for religious corporations, security for a citizen, and more respect for a man's dignity. Ibarra objects, saying that such institutions as the priesthood, religious corporations, and the Guardia Civil are necessary evils that must be tolerated by society. Chapter 50. Elias' story. Elias narrates his story and the misfortunes of his ancestors. His great-grandfather, he recounts, works as a bookkeeper for a Spaniard. When he is accused for arson and is flogged and paraded in the streets of Manila, ashamed and disgraced, his wife becomes a prostitute, while one of his sons becomes a notorious bandit. The other son travels from town to town until he is hired as a laborer and marries a rich woman. Elias and his sister are born of this marriage, and both are educated in Manila. But when their family's past surfaces, they lose everything. Elias' sister commits suicide, and when he roams the province as a hunted and lonely man. Chapter 51. Exchanges. Padre Salve informs Linares, Maria Clara, and Capitan Tiago that Ibarra's excommunication has been lifted, and the last obstacle to be hurdled is for Ibarra to ask for forgiveness from Padre Damaso. Ibarra asks Sinang if Maria Clara is angry with him and insists that he wants to speak with Maria Clara. Chapter 52. The Cards of the Dead and the Shadows. 3 men are in the cemetery waiting for Lucas. They discuss their impending attack on the barracks and the church, which they believe is organized by Ibarra. Lucas arrives and instructs them to attack the church and the barracks, shouting, "Viva Don Crisostomo!" Elias, after following Lucas, learns about the attack that will implicate Ibarra. Chapter 53. Ibuon dice conosce da mattina. Don Filippo visits Tasio the sage who's ill. He tells Tasio that he has resigned from his position because he is fed up with the Gobernador Silio's ineptitude. Tasio praises the Don's actions, saying that resistance must be used not only against the Gobernador Silio, but against all persons who abuse their authority. Chapter 54. Revelations. Padre Salvi warns the alferez about the impending attack on the town. He informs the alferez to ready his men and to send 4 soldiers to guard the church. Elias alerts Ibarra on the imminent attack on the town that will be blamed on him. He helps Ibarra dispose of some letters that could implicate him. In one of these letters, Elias discovers that Ibarra's great-grandfather was the Spaniard who had accused his great-grandfather of arson. Chapter 55. The Catastrophe. Ibarra enters Capitan Tiago's house as soon as he hears shots fired near the convent. Ibarra returns to his house and is arrested by the Guardia Civil. Seeing what has happened, Elias enters Ibarra's house and intentionally sets a fire to destroy any evidence that could implicate Ibarra in the failed attack. Chapter 56. Rumors and Beliefs. Rumors circulate in the terrified town. After the eventful night, some people assumed that Don Filippo and Crisostomo Ibarra have been arrested by the Guardia Civil, while others think that some bandits were caught in the night. Chapter 57. Vae Victis. The Guardia Civil imprison the individuals implicated in the failed attack. They torture Tarsilo to obtain a confession from him and to make him disclose the mastermind of the failed attack, but Tarsilo remains silent up to his death. Chapter 58. The Accursed. The crying relative of those arrested waited outside the barracks of the Guardia Civil. Ibarra, together with the other prisoners, are led out of their cells to be transported to the provincial capital. Along the way, Ibarra is cursed, stoned, and ridiculed by the people, blaming him for their misfortunes and hardships. Chapter 59. Patriotism and Private Interest. The people of Manila discussed the failed rebellion falsely blamed on Ibarra. The friars praised Padre Salve for alerting the authorities about the rebellion, while others criticized the Jesuits who declared that Ibarra had been educated at the Ateneo. Chapter 60. Maria Clara weds. Capitan Tiago invites guests and visitors to celebrate the impending marriage of Maria Clara and Linares. Maria Clara goes to the Atizoa, where she sees Crisostomo leaping out from a boat. She asks Crisostomo for forgiveness since she's about to be married to someone else, but declares that she would never forget her vow of faithfulness to him. Chapter 61. The Chase on the Lake. Two boatloads of Guardia Civil pursue Elias and Ibarra on the lake. Elias jumps into the river to mislead the pursuers, thus saving Ibarra. Chapter 62. Padre Damaso explains. Maria is distraught when she learns that Ibarra has been killed while trying to escape. Out of desperation, Maria Clara asks Padre Damaso to break her marriage engagement and to permit her to enter the nunnery. After vainly arguing with Maria Clara, Padre Damaso gives his permission. Chapter 63. Christmas Eve. Basilio returns to San Diego to look for his insane mother. Upon seeing her in the town, he runs after her until they enter the forest owned by the Ibarras. Sisa dies, after eventually recognizing her son. When Basilio regains consciousness, Elias orders him to cremate him and his mother. Chapter 64. The Epilogue. Padre Damaso is reassigned as parish priest to a distant province but is found dead the day after. Maria Clara enters the Santa Clara Nunnery where Padre Salve regularly preaches and holds an important office. Capitan Tiago stops going to church and is now addicted to opium and gambling. The alferez, who has been promoted as second lieutenant, goes back to Spain, leaving his wife, Doña Consolacion, behind. Doña Victorina still tries to live the life of a Spanish woman, while her cousin Linares dies of dysentery. Two Spanish guards seize an insane nun standing at the top of the Santa Clara convent during a raging storm.
Why was the Rizal hero a Criole? The Rizal novels is so morbid of matter, but so comic in manner. His novel contains elements that our stricter sensibilities would purge away. The question is, why did Rizal choose for a heroine that is a mestiza of shameful conception? The answer was, Maria Clara was no heroine to Rizal, but an object of satire. Iconoclast rejects Maria Clara and believe that whether she was a heroine to Rizal, she was not a heroine to us. But having disposed of his heroine, we are still confronted by his equally impossible hero. Impossible because he offends our racial pride. Another question was raised. Why should the hero of the great Filipino novel be not a Filipino, but a Spanish Filipino, with the quotes expressing our misgivings? A Criole class had never existed in the Philippines until the Spaniards invaded us. Some Spaniards did establish families which produced Criole, and the Rochas were the most durable. Ligardas and Aranetas seems like a purely native Principalia but began as a Criole. Up to around midway 19th century, however, the Philippine Creoles had no such scruples about blood purity and were distinguished as a class. The first novel, Noli, tangere. Ibarra, as the protagonist in the novel, was still considered as a Criole. Despite that he was away from a Spanish grandfather, he was a far more than he was a Migsalin. Another question raised was, why did Rizal make this translated Filipino his hero? The answer was, we assume that Rizal meant the revolution of 1896, to which he was looking forward as a prophet. The novels were written about a decade before 1896, and which the events during this time is the one who shaped Rizal. There was a revolution happened way back 1850s, and during this time, Rizal knew that Spain was overthrown in America due to the uprising of the Creoles and that it will happen in the Philippines. So when he was writing the novel, he was thinking of the movement. He was not looking forward to 1896. He was looking back to 1872. He was chronicling the Creole Revolution in the Philippines. Creole. The Creoles formed our first secular clergy, our first civil service. Only late in Spanish times, with the relaxation of the restrictions on land owning, did the Creole turn to agriculture. All this time, the Creole and the Philippine colony in general lived in isolation from Spain, and neglect fostered autonomy spirit. The Creole was a Filipino, not a Spaniard. The previous centuries of Spain in the Philippines has been years of Christianization, unification, and development, but only the final century was a period of Hispanization. The campaign to Hispanize the islands was intensifying when the revolution broke out. Meanwhile, the Philippine Creole was rising, steered into insurgents of Mexican Creole. The Novales revolt in the 1820s planted the idea of separatism. Local Creoles had heard that in Mexico or Mexico, a Creole had been proclaimed emperor after a revolution. 2 decades after the Novales revolt erupted mysteriously in the conspiracy of the Palmeros, an affair that involved a Creole family. A decade later, in 1850s, the Creole Revolution becomes manifest in Father Pilaes. Father Pilaes started the propaganda for the Filipinization of the clergy. He perished in the cathedral during a great earthquake of 1863, but left a disciple to carry on his work, known as Jose Burgos. Burgos is the Creole of the 1870, whom has Antonio Regidor as a counterpart in the secular sphere. The fate of Burgos and Regidor put an end in the idea of eventualism. The novelist probed these two phases of the Creole Revolution. The family of Rizals, or called Ibarra. The family of Rizals here traces the evolution from Spaniards. The great-grandfather still bears the original Basque name, Ibarramindia, which his descendants abbreviate to Ibarra. Don Pedro. He is a businessman who accuses his bookkeeper when his warehouse was burned down and ruined the bookkeeper as well as his descendants. He appears in San Diego and vanished. Later, his rotting corpse is found hanging on a balete tree in the woods. The woods where he hanged himself becomes haunted. A few months later, his son named Saturnino appeared in San Diego. Saturnino, he claims the property, settled in the village, and starts an indigo farm. In these two initial generations of Ibaras, we see the Criole of warriors born too late for knight errantry and forced into grubberier task. One goes into business and ends up suicide, while the other turns into a frontier man. Rizal sees the later-day Criole as engaged in another conquesta. As long as the Criole was merely defending the land as empire, the land was his, but he was not the land. The change shows in a third-generation Ibarra named Don Rafael. Don Rafael, he was the one outrageous the Peninsulars. He sends his only son to study in Switzerland. He was influenced by liberalism of the 1860s. He was sent to jail after knocking down Suez Canal, an illiterate that punishes a child who mocked him. The fourth generation Ibarra has a proper Victorian faith in education, science, propaganda, and excellences of Europe. He was named Juan Crisostomo. Juan Crisostomo doesn't care to pursue the quarrel with the Criole and the Peninsular. His life was saved by Elias, the last descendant of his great-grandfather's bookkeeper. Ibarra becomes the revolutionary, not Elias. He repeats the Criole versus Peninsular theme by making Ibarra's rival for Maria Clara. In the accursed woods where his Spanish ancestor hanged himself, he ceases to be a naive Edmond Dantes and became a malevolent Monte Cristo. Simon. Simon of Rizal was unhappy even in revenge. He is one of the darkest creation of literature. A man who believes salvation can come only from total corruption. He is beyond any wish upon reform, or autonomy, or representation in the Cortes. Unlike Monte Cristo, Simon fails. Dying, he flees to the house. The house was located beside the Pacific, where lives Father Florentino. And through Father Florentino, Rizal seems to annul what he was been saying so passionately through Simon. The final chapter was beautiful but unsatisfactory. The Noli tangere had mocked the naivety of the reformist, the futility of collaboration. El filibusterismo should therefore have unequivocally justified revolution. The Criole Revolution had flopped. The abortive Criole Revolution did create a climate of subversion. But what happened to America did not happen here. An actual Criole revolt did not break out. The Indio beat the Criole to the draw. The modern descendants of Crioles have had no one fate. The very rich ones who were in 1970s becoming more and more Filipino have today become more and more Spanish.
For the next topic, we have Necessary Fictions, Philippine Literature and Nation by Carolyn Howe, 2000. The Fiction of a Knowledgeable Community. Necessary Fictions examines the intimate but fraught connection between Philippine literature and nationalist discourse through close reading of the works of Jose Rizal, Amado Hernandez, Nick Joaquin, Edgardo Reyes, Ricardo Lee, Kirima Polotan, Carlos Bulosan, and Mano de Verdades Posadas. The book argues that the long-standing affinity between Philippine literature and nationalism is based in part on the power of literature to work through a set of questions central to nationalist debates on the possibility and necessity of social change. It asks what is the relationship between knowledge and action, between the personal and the political, between the foreign and Filipino, between culture and history, culture and politics, culture and economics. Moreover, Philippine literature does not merely deepen our understanding on the fundamental assumptions informing nationalist discourse and practice. It also registers the contradictions that exceed nationalist attempt to intervene intellectually and politically in the complex realities at work in the Philippine society. These excesses, which bear the ineradicable signatures of the oppressed and the marginalized, expose the anxieties and the liberatory potential underpinning the difficult creation of Philippine modernity in the 20th century. Chapter 2 focuses on Rizal's Noli tangere and how subsequent generations of scholars have used Rizal and his novel to address Rizal's fictional the alienation of a Filipino knowledgeable community that became the conceptual basis of the Filipino nation. Critical reception of the Noli, both in Rizal's time and beyond, principally concerns itself with the problem of appropriating a modern that is seen as having a foreign and external provenance. Rizal's novels, by deliberately destabilizing the distinction between the real and the fictional, between literature and history, provided the basis for an influential formulation of the knowable community as an indispensable component, both by the means and ends, of a radical political imagination and transformation. But Rizal's narrative project of rendering the Filipino national community knowable was also unstable and tentative, largely because Rizal's literary project of depicting or representing the people who inhabit the Philippines compelled the recognition that writing about the Philippines always meant writing from a position. That is, the idea of writing from a specific social location necessarily implied the existence of other competing knowledges and perspectives. Furthermore, the existence of heterogeneous perspectives embodied by individuals and groups of people could not be fully recuperated by the universalist rhetoric of development and freedom that Rizal invoked in his depiction of Philippine conditions and in his call for action and self-sacrifice. Rizal's novels are a kind of master narrative within, or against which modern Philippine fiction attempted to work, through a set of unresolved issues relating to the problem of truth and action in a society that was split into different contending groups for whom independence had always been a tedious issue. Well, that is all for our report. Thank you so much for listening.